At the altar, my fiancé invited his ex-girlfriend, calling her the love of my life in front of everyone. He smirked, "You're in too deep to back out now, no matter what I do." I smiled, pulled out a document, and said, "This wedding is cancelled." His face turned pale with fear. "Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Go ahead and get comfortable, maybe pour yourself a cup of tea, and let me tell you a story. It's the story of my dream wedding, and how it turned into the most public nightmare you can possibly imagine. It's the story of how my fiancé invited his ex-girlfriend to our wedding and called her the love of his life right in front of me, my family, and all our friends, as a joke. And this is the story of how I responded by canceling the entire thing, right then and there. Before the chaos, before the humiliation and the sweet, satisfying revenge, there was just us. Me, Audrey, and my fiancé, Mitchell. To understand how things could go so spectacularly wrong, you have to understand how wonderfully right they seemed for so long. I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. I'm 28, or at least I was when this all went down. I work in marketing for a tech company here in Chicago. It's a good job, with a good salary, and I've worked my tail off to get where I am. For 4 years, the absolute center of my universe was Mitchell. We met in that storybook way you see in movies, at a friend's housewarming party back in 2019. The air was thick with the smell of fresh paint and cheap pizza. I was feeling a little awkward, standing by the snack table pretending to be fascinated by a bowl of pretzels, when this handsome, charming man walked up and made a joke about a questionable-looking dip. That was Mitch. The chemistry was instantaneous. The rest of the crowded, noisy room just faded into a blur. We talked for hours, leaning against the kitchen counter, about everything and nothing. We discovered a shared love for obscure indie bands from the early 2000s and a mutual disdain for the reality TV shows we both secretly watched every week. A year later, we decided to move in together. Finding the right place was an adventure in itself. We spent weeks looking at listings, arguing playfully over hardwood floors versus carpet. We finally settled on an apartment that wasn't anything special on paper, a generic 2-bedroom with paper-thin walls where you could hear your neighbors sneeze. It had a less than inspiring view of an identical brick building across the street. But we were determined to make it our home. I'll never forget the first weekend we spent there, covered in paint, bickering over which shade of blue was the right shade of blue for the living room. We ended up ordering a pizza and eating it on the floor, using drop cloths as a picnic blanket, exhausted and happy. We bought a lumpy, oversized couch that was so big we had to take the door off its hinges to get it inside, and that couch became our spot for our Sunday night rituals, takeout from our favorite Thai place and binge-watching old crime dramas. And then there was Bowie. He was our first child. I'd always wanted a cat, and one Saturday, I dragged a reluctant Mitch to a local animal shelter, just to look, I promised. Of course, that's never how it works. In a cage in the back, there was this tiny, fluffy orange kitten with the most unusual eyes I'd ever seen, one bright blue, the other a startling green. I knew in an instant. He was ours. I named him Bowie. Mitch grumbled about it for a week, but soon, that little fluff ball had him wrapped around his paw. Bowie, however, was my shadow. Mitch always joked he was more my cat than his, and he wasn't wrong. Bowie grew into a massive, majestic Maine Coon, a gentle giant who would curl up on my chest every single night, his purr a rumbling engine that lulled me to sleep. Every morning, at 5:45 a.m. on the dot, he'd attack my feet under the covers, my personal, furry alarm clock. He'd follow me from room to room, sitting on the edge of the bathroom sink while I brushed my teeth, watching me with an air of solemn feline judgment. I truly, deeply believed Mitchell was my soulmate. My coworkers would tease me mercilessly about the way my face would light up when his name flashed on my phone. My morning routine wasn't complete until I'd sent him a silly meme I found online, usually with a caption like, "Me trying to get to work." We had built a life, a comfortable, happy little world for the two of us, a world I thought was unshakable. I loved him, deeply and completely. I trusted him with every fiber of my being. And that trust, well, that trust was the first casualty in the war that was about to begin. I just didn't know it yet. The first sign, the first real crack in the perfect facade of our life together, happened about a year before the wedding. After 3 long years of late nights, working weekends, and pouring every ounce of my creativity and energy into my job, I finally got the promotion I'd been fighting for. Senior Marketing Manager. It was a huge deal for me. It wasn't just about the title or the significant salary increase, it was the validation. It was proof that all my hard work had paid off. I was so incredibly proud. To celebrate, Mitchell organized a surprise party for me at our favorite local brewery. It was, on the surface, incredibly thoughtful. He'd invited all my closest friends, my parents, and my entire work team, including my boss, Mr. Harrison. The place was buzzing with energy. Everyone was congratulating me, patting me on the back, and for the first hour, it was perfect. I was standing there, holding a craft beer, my heart so full it felt like it could burst, feeling so completely loved and celebrated. Then came the toast. Mitchell, ever the showman, stood up on a chair, clinked his glass with a spoon, and got everyone's attention. I smiled up at him, my heart doing a little flutter, expecting some sweet, heartfelt words. Instead, I saw a familiar, mischievous glint appear in his eyes, the one that always preceded one of his jokes. The one I'd later learned to dread. To Audrey, he began, his voice booming a little too loudly across the noisy room. Who, after years of hard work, must have some serious dirt on our CEO to get a promotion like this? He winked at the crowd. A few of his friends hooped and hollered. My work friends managed a few nervous chuckles. I felt my smile tighten. He wasn't done. Seriously, honey, you must have charmed the pants off the old man to climb the ladder that fast. We're all so proud of your talents. The air went still. My boss, Mr. Harrison, a kind, grandfatherly man who was happily married and deeply religious, was standing not 10 feet away. My entire team was there, the people I managed, the people I needed to respect me. The laughter was strained and awkward now. I felt a hot, prickling flash crawl up my neck and spread across my face. My smile felt like it was made of concrete. I just stood there, my beer suddenly heavy in my hand, trying to pretend that I was in on the joke, that I found it just as funny as he did. Later that night, the drive home was excruciatingly silent. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of the engine. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the looks on my colleagues' faces. Finally, as we pulled into our driveway, I got the courage to speak. Mitch, I started, my voice barely a whisper. What you said tonight, it really bothered me. It was in front of my boss, in front of everyone. He cut the engine and sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of exasperation. He didn't even look at me. Oh, come on, Audrey. Don't start. It was a joke. It was a roast. That's what people do at parties. It didn't feel like a joke, I said, the words catching in my throat. It felt like you were telling everyone that I didn't earn my promotion. That I did something inappropriate to get it. You undermined me. He finally turned to me, and in the dim light of the dashboard, I could see the annoyance in his eyes. He actually rolled his eyes. You need to learn to take a joke. Seriously. You're being way too sensitive. It's not a big deal. Everyone knew I was kidding. But they didn't. And I knew it. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. At breakfast, Mitch was completely normal, cheerful even, talking about plans for the weekend as if nothing had happened. He didn't see, or didn't care, that his words had cast a shadow. I spent the next week at work feeling like I was walking on eggshells, overcompensating in meetings, trying to be extra professional, all to erase the image his joke had planted in everyone's minds. And I, like a fool, let him get away with it. I buried the hurt, telling myself he was right. I was just being too sensitive. It was just a joke. The promotion party should have been a massive, waving red flag, the kind they use at airports to ground planes. But love, as they say, is not only blind, it's also deaf and stubbornly optimistic. I was determined to see only the good in Mitchell, to believe that his heart was in the right place even when his words were not. So, 6 months later, when he planned a lavish dinner at our favorite upscale restaurant, the one with the crisp white tablecloths, the flickering candles, and the ridiculously expensive wine list, I let myself get swept away. The evening started out like a fairy tale. He had a dozen red roses waiting at our table. He was more charming and attentive than he'd been in months, telling me how beautiful I looked, holding my hand across the table, his eyes full of what I thought was adoration. He talked about our future, about a house in the suburbs, about what we'd name our kids. He was selling me the dream, and I was buying every single word. When the dessert menus came, his expression shifted. He got the serious, intense look on his face. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This is it, I thought. This is the moment. He stood up, his chair scraping softly against the polished floor. He walked around the table and, right there in the middle of the elegant dining room, he got down on one knee. He pulled out a small, dark blue velvet box. The ambient chatter of the restaurant seemed to fade into a hush. People at other tables turned to watch, their faces breaking into soft, knowing smiles. "Audrey," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, the exact one I'd pointed out in a jewelry store window months ago, thinking he wasn't even paying attention. "You are my sun, my moon, and all my stars. I can't imagine a single day of my life without you in it." He took a deep, shaky breath, and my eyes filled with happy tears. He paused, looking deep into my eyes. "But I'm sorry. I can't do this." My world stopped. The blood rushed from my head, leaving me dizzy and cold. I could hear a woman at the next table let out a small, horrified gasp. The smiles on the faces of the onlookers faltered and fell. "What?" I whispered, the sound getting lost in my throat. "What do you mean?" He kept a pained, apologetic expression on his face, shaking his head slowly. "I'm just not ready, Audrey. This is all too fast. I need to think about this." He just stayed there, on one knee, holding the open ring box, for what felt like an entire lifetime. I was frozen in a nightmare, trapped in the spotlight of public pity. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. An older couple nearby looked like they were about to get up and come over to console me. I felt a full-blown panic attack starting to bubble up in my chest. My vision started to get blurry, the candles on the tables blurring into streaks of light. And just as I was about to completely shatter, just as a sob was about to break from my lips, his face split into a huge, triumphant grin. He let out a loud, barking laugh. "Of course I'll marry you, you idiot," he boomed, mimicking what he thought a woman would say. "Gotcha. Oh, my God, you should see your face right now. It's priceless." He slid the beautiful ring onto my numb finger as if nothing had happened, still chuckling to himself. The restaurant erupted in a wave of confused, hesitant applause. He stood up, pulled me into a hug, and kissed me hard, whispering, "I love you," against my lips. I just stood there, my mind reeling, my heart feeling like a shattered piece of glass in my chest. He had taken one of the most sacred, intimate moments of my life and twisted it into a cruel, public prank for his own amusement and a cheap laugh from strangers. On the car ride home, he was giddy, replaying the moment over and over. "Did you see the look on that old lady's face? I thought she was going to have a heart attack." He was oblivious to my silence, to the single tear that slipped down my cheek in the darkness. I should have taken that ring off. I should have thrown it out the car window. I should have told him to stop the car and gotten out and never looked back. But I didn't. He told me it was just his way of making the moment unforgettable. And he was right. I would never, ever forget it. In the months that followed, we dove headfirst into wedding planning. It was a dizzying whirlwind of venues, caterers, florists, and endless spreadsheets. It was also incredibly, overwhelmingly expensive. My parents, bless their hearts, contributed what they could, but most of the financial burden fell squarely on my shoulders. With my promotion and the higher salary that came with it, I was in a much better financial position than Mitch, who worked in a field with less income stability. I told myself it was fine, that it was an investment in our future. The deposit for the beautiful, rustic barn venue outside the city? My credit card. The down payment for the highly sought-after photographer? My savings account. The plane tickets and the deposit for the 2-week, all-inclusive honeymoon to a private villa in Bali? All me. I remember one evening, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by bills and contracts, transferring a huge chunk of my savings, feeling a momentary pang of anxiety. But then I looked at the picture of Mitch and me on the fridge, smiling and happy, and I pushed the feeling down. I was building our dream, and I wanted it to be perfect. But as I was building, my best friend, Lorraine, was trying to warn me that the foundation was cracked. Lorraine has been my rock since we were college roommates. She's sharp, fiercely loyal, and has a built-in nonsense detector that has saved me more times than I can count. One afternoon, we were sitting in our favorite coffee shop, a little place with mismatched chairs and the best almond croissants in the city. I'd brought along a binder overflowing with wedding ideas. I was bubbling over with excitement about some centerpiece mock-ups, and she was unusually quiet, just stirring her cappuccino and watching me with a worried look in her eyes. Finally, she put her cup down with a soft click and looked me straight in the eye. "Audrey," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to talk about Mitch." I immediately got defensive. It was an automatic response by then. "What about him? Don't you like the calligraphy on the invitations?" "This isn't about the wedding, it's about the groom," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I'm worried about you. The way he treats you sometimes, it's not right. That stunt he pulled at your promotion party was bad enough. But what he did when he proposed? That was cruel, Audrey. There's no other word for it." I sighed, picking at the edge of a napkin. "Lorraine, you just don't get his sense of humor. He's a prankster. He loves a good joke. He doesn't mean any harm by it." "That's not a joke, Audrey," she insisted, leaning forward across the small table. "That's public humiliation. He gets off on making you feel small in front of other people. It's like he needs to knock you down a peg to feel big himself. It's a pattern. It's emotional manipulation." Her words were like sharp little needles, each one hitting a nerve I'd been trying to ignore. "That's not true," I said, my voice a little too loud. "He loves me. You don't see how he is when we're alone. He can be so sweet and supportive." "Can be?" she challenged gently. "Or is he? Does he support you when he's telling your boss you slept your way to a promotion? Does he love you when he's making you cry in a restaurant full of strangers? I'm your best friend, and it's my job to tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. And the truth is, I think you deserve so much better." The conversation ended on a tense note. I packed up my binder, told her she was wrong, that she was being overly dramatic. But her words followed me home. They echoed in my head late at night as I lay next to a sleeping Mitchell. I pushed them away, telling myself she was just being overprotective. I was so invested. I had put so much of myself, my money, my heart, my future, into this relationship. I couldn't bear the thought that my best friend might be right, that the life I was pouring everything into was a terrible, terrible mistake. About a month before the big day, the vague sense of unease I'd been wrestling with started to sharpen into genuine, gut-wrenching dread. It wasn't just Lorraine's warnings echoing in my head anymore. The bad vibes were coming from Mitchell's own camp. His groomsmen, a rowdy, boisterous bunch led by his best man and childhood friend, Keith, started acting strangely around me. They had always been a bit juvenile for my taste, but now their behavior took on a new, unsettling edge. Whenever I'd walk into a room where they were gathered with Mitch, laughing loudly, the conversation would die instantly. They'd exchange these shifty, conspiratorial glances and then break into stifled, inside-joke giggles as soon as I walked away. It made my skin crawl. It felt like I was in high school all over again, the nerdy girl walking past the cool kids' table. The final straw came during the joint bachelor-bachelorette weekend we'd planned. It wasn't a wild Vegas trip, just a relaxed getaway at a big lake house we rented with our entire wedding party. The weekend was mostly fine, filled with grilling, swimming, and board games. But the undercurrent of secrecy from Mitch's friends was palpable. One evening, after a few too many beers, I found myself sitting on the wraparound porch, looking out at the moonlit water. Mitch was inside, at the center of a loud, obnoxious card game. I was enjoying a rare moment of peace when Keith came outside and sat down next to me, reeking of cheap beer and false confidence. He had this smug, knowing smirk on his face that I was starting to truly hate. "So, Audrey," he said, nudging me playfully with his elbow. "Getting nervous? You better be ready for the big day." I forced a smile, trying to be polite. "I think I am. Just trying not to stress over the final seating chart." "Oh, I'm not talking about the seating chart," he said, his smirk widening into a grin. "I'm talking about the show. Mitch has got something absolutely epic planned for you. You're gonna love it." He chuckled to himself, a low, rumbling sound. A cold, heavy feeling washed over me, like being dunked in the icy lake water. "A show?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about, Keith?" He just laughed, a dismissive, patronizing sound that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "You'll see. Just make sure you're a good sport about it, okay?" He got up, stretched, and swaggered back inside to the game, leaving me alone with the chirping crickets and the frantic, panicked beating of my own heart. A good sport. The words echoed in my head. Be a good sport like at the promotion party. Be a good sport like at the proposal. Suddenly, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He was planning something. Another joke. But this one would be on the biggest, most important stage of my life, our wedding day. I waited until the party died down, until everyone had stumbled off to bed. I found Mitch in the kitchen, making a late-night sandwich. The lake house was finally quiet. "Mitch, what is Keith talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. "What are you planning for the wedding?" He put on his most innocent, wide-eyed face, the one he used when he was trying to convince me of something he knew was a blatant lie. "What?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, honey. Keith was just drunk." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising with a desperate edge. "He said you have a show planned for me. He told me to be a good sport." "What is it, Mitchell?" He wouldn't look at me. He busied himself with spreading mustard on his bread, his movements suddenly very deliberate. He was just rambling. You know how he gets. "There's nothing planned. I promise." But the way he said it, the way his eyes darted around the room, refusing to meet mine, told me everything I needed to know. He was lying. And in that moment, as I stood in that quiet kitchen, something inside me broke. The naive, trusting, hopeful part of me finally went silent, and a colder, harder, more pragmatic voice took over. If he was planning a war, I wasn't going to walk onto the battlefield unarmed. The 4-hour drive home from that lake house was the quietest, most agonizing drive of my life. Mitchell slept in the passenger seat, snoring softly, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I just drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind racing a mile a minute. I was done being a good sport. I was done being the punchline to his cruel jokes. If he was going to turn our wedding day into a circus, then I was damn well going to be the ringmaster. The first thing I did when we got back to our apartment in Chicago was wait for him to go take a shower. The second he was behind the closed bathroom door, I grabbed my phone and walked out onto our little balcony. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm. I scrolled through my contacts and pressed the call button next to the name Walter. Walter is the kind of friend everyone should have, a sharp-witted, fiercely loyal, no-nonsense lawyer who usually spends his time dealing with complex corporate litigation but still makes time to give his friends free legal advice at parties. I caught him just as he was leaving his office. "Walt, it's Audrey," I said, my voice tight, skipping the usual pleasantries. "I need your help. It's about the wedding." I poured out the whole miserable story. The jokes, the public humiliations, the weird behavior from the groomsmen, my gut-wrenching feeling that Mitchell was planning some kind of catastrophic prank for the wedding day itself. Walter listened patiently, the only sound on his end the occasional rustle of papers and the distant sound of city traffic. He didn't interrupt me once. When I was finally done, my voice hoarse, he was silent for a long moment. I was afraid he was going to tell me I was overreacting, just like Mitch always did. Instead, he said, "Okay. This guy sounds like a certifiable narcissist and a complete piece of work. What do you need from me, Audrey? Whatever it is, you've got it." A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me dizzy. "I need a weapon," I said, the words tasting strange and powerful in my mouth. "I need something that looks official, something that looks intimidating. I need you to draft a prenuptial agreement for me." Walter was momentarily confused. "A prenup? Audrey, you're 2 weeks out from the wedding. You'd never get it signed, and it wouldn't be legally binding at this point. It would be thrown out of court." "I know," I said, a cold sort of calm settling over me. "It doesn't have to be real. It just has to look real. I want it filled with the most intimidating legal jargon you can think of. And I want one very specific clause in it. A poison pill." I laid out my idea. The clause would state that if either party engaged in the willful and public humiliation of the other prior to the signing of the marriage license, all shared financial obligations, including any and all costs related to the wedding ceremony, reception, and that very expensive honeymoon, would be immediately nullified and become the sole responsibility of the offending party. It would also stipulate that the offending party would be required to make a formal, public apology to the wronged party in front of all witnesses present. Walter was quiet for a second, and then I heard him let out a low chuckle. "Audrey, this is brilliantly diabolical. I absolutely love it. I'll have my paralegal make it look like the real deal. Consider it done." 2 days later, a thick, professional-looking manila envelope arrived at my office via courier. Inside was the most official-looking document I had ever seen. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored bond paper, with a fancy blue cover sheet that said prenuptial agreement. It was sealed with a shiny gold foil sticker that looked exactly like a notary stamp. Walter had gone all out. The text was dense with words like heretofore, whereas, and notwithstanding. And there it was, on page 3, my clause, my poison pill, written in the most impenetrable legalese imaginable. I folded it carefully and tucked it away in a black portfolio folder. I felt a strange mix of terror and empowerment. I prayed to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in that I would never have to use it. But as I hid the folder in the back of my closet, tucked away beneath my winter sweaters, I knew, deep down, that I would. This wasn't just a document. This was my escape plan. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and painfully beautiful. The sky was a perfect, cloudless, impossibly blue dome. Of course it was. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic and a sick sense of irony. I went through the motions of the morning in a strange, detached daze. It felt like I was watching a movie of someone else getting married. The hairdresser curled my hair into an elegant updo. The makeup artist airbrushed my face into a flawless mask. I sipped the mimosa my best friend Lorraine handed me, the bubbles tickling my nose, but I couldn't taste it. My bridesmaids buzzed around me, a flurry of lavender silk and nervous energy. They knew something was off. I hadn't been myself for weeks, a cloud of anxiety hanging over me that I couldn't explain to them. But they didn't press. They just kept telling me how beautiful I looked and making sure my glass was never empty. When we arrived at the venue, my breath caught in my throat. The old renovated barn was even more stunning than I had remembered. It was strung with thousands of twinkling fairy lights, making the rustic wooden beams glitter like a starry sky. The floral arrangements I had agonized over for months were everywhere, huge cascades of lilies, roses, and eucalyptus that filled the air with their sweet, heavy scent. It was the wedding I had saved to my Pinterest board for years. A perfect, romantic dream. It felt like a beautiful, elaborate, and very cruel joke. I saw my parents waiting for me in the bridal suite. My mother was already dabbing her eyes with a lace-trimmed tissue. She cries during heartwarming car commercials, so this was no surprise. My father, looking incredibly handsome and deeply uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo, gave me a tight, fierce hug. "You look like a princess, sweetheart," he whispered into my hair. I pulled back and handed him the slim black portfolio folder containing my secret weapon. He didn't ask what it was. He'd seen the look in my eyes the past few weeks. He just gave me a long, searching look, then tucked it into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and gave me a firm, reassuring nod. He was on my side, no questions asked. As I stood in the back of the barn, hidden from view, waiting for my cue to walk down the aisle, I peeked through a crack in the door. I saw Mitchell at the altar. He was laughing with his groomsmen, slapping Keith on the back, looking handsome and utterly carefree in his tailored suit. He caught my eye for a split second and gave me a huge, beaming, 1,000-watt smile. It wasn't the smile of a nervous groom. It was the smile of a man who thought he had everyone fooled. It was the smile of a man who thought he held all the cards, who was about to pull off the prank of a lifetime. It made my stomach clench with a cold, hard knot of certainty. The string quartet started playing Pachelbel's Canon. The music was beautiful, but to me, it sounded like a funeral dirge. My father took my arm. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I took a deep breath, the scent of lilies filling my lungs. "Ready," I lied. As we started that long walk down the aisle, past the rows of smiling, expectant faces of our friends and family, all I could think about was the cold, hard document tucked away in my father's jacket. Every step felt like a march toward a battlefield. I was the bride, the guest of honor at my own public execution. But they didn't know I had a final say in how this was all going to end. The ceremony started normally enough, which only made my anxiety worse. The officiant, a kind-faced older gentleman with a warm, calming voice, spoke eloquently about the sanctity of marriage, about love and partnership and commitment. My mother was already on her second tissue packet in the front row, sniffling softly. My father stood stoically beside me. Everything was going according to the script. It was all running too smoothly. I could feel the tension coiling in my gut like a snake. We got to the vows. Mitchell went first. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and cleared his throat. His vows were surprisingly sweet, full of promises of forever and ever, of being my rock and my biggest fan. He sounded so sincere, his voice thick with emotion. For one terrifying, treacherous second, I allowed myself to wonder if I had been wrong. Maybe Keith was just drunk and talking nonsense. Maybe this was all just my paranoia running wild. Maybe he really did love me. Then it was my turn. I took a breath to start reciting the vows I had memorized, the words I had practiced in front of the mirror until they felt like a part of me. But before I could get a single word out, Mitchell held up a hand to the officiant, stopping him mid-sentence. He turned to face our 120 guests, a wide, performative, almost manic smile plastered on his face. "Before Audrey says her vows," he announced, his voice amplified by the small microphone clipped to his lapel, making it boom through the silent barn, "I have one more little surprise for my wonderful, beautiful bride." My blood ran cold. My hopeful fantasy shattered into a million pieces. This was it. He turned his gaze toward the large, heavy barn doors at the back of the venue and gestured dramatically, like a game show host revealing the grand prize. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice full of theatrical flair, "please give a warm, heartfelt welcome to the true love of my life. A collective, audible gasp went through the crowd. Heads swiveled around, a wave of confusion passing through our guests. The barn doors swung open, and a woman stood silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. As she stepped inside and the doors closed behind her, my heart didn't just stop. It felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. It was Brenda. His ex-girlfriend from college. The one he'd dated for 3 years before we met. The one he'd drunkenly confessed to a mutual friend was the one that got away. The one he had sworn on his life he hadn't spoken to in years. She was wearing a slinky, fire-engine red dress that clung to her every curve, a dress that screamed "look at me" in a sea of tasteful pastels and formal suits. She sashayed down the aisle as if she were walking a runway at Fashion Week, a smug, self-satisfied little smile playing on her lips. Mitchell was beaming, positively glowing with pride at his own cleverness. He beckoned her up to the altar. "Come on up, Bren," he called out. She came and stood right beside him, so close that the fabric of her garish red dress was brushing against the delicate lace of my wedding gown. He draped a casual, familiar arm around her shoulders. "You didn't really think I could go through with this without my first love here to give her blessing, did you?" he said directly to me, his eyes sparkling with mischief. The silence in the barn was absolute, broken only by a few nervous, shuffling coughs. I just stared at him, my face a frozen, emotionless mask. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching a terrible movie of someone else's life unfold. I honestly thought that was the punchline. I thought bringing his ex-girlfriend to our wedding and standing her next to him at the altar was the entirety of his grand, humiliating joke. I was so wrong. That was just the opening act of his sick little play. He kept his arm wrapped snugly around Brenda's shoulders. She was preening under the attention, soaking it all in. He looked at me, his smile faltering slightly as he registered my complete lack of reaction. He was still expecting me to laugh, to play along, to be the good sport. "Come on, honey, it's funny, right?" he urged, his voice a little too loud, a little too strained. "After all, Brenda and I have been talking a lot lately. You know, catching up on old times. It was important to me that she be here to approve of you." "Talking a lot?" I managed to whisper, the words feeling like sandpaper in my throat. My mind was reeling. The lies, the deception, it was all so much worse than I had imagined. He completely ignored me, turning his attention back to our horrified and deeply uncomfortable guests. He was on a roll now, the star of his own show. He wasn't just satisfied with bringing his ex. He had to take it a step further. He had to turn my potential pain and humiliation into a spectator sport, a game. "Oh, and just for fun," he announced, practically giddy with self-satisfaction, "I've been running a little poll with my groomsmen." He pulled his phone out of his pocket and held it up high for everyone to see, as if it were a trophy. He had a group chat open. "We've been placing bets all morning on how today would go down." He scrolled through the messages with his thumb, a triumphant look on his face. The groomsmen, including Keith, were standing behind him, snickering like delinquent schoolboys. "Let's see." Keith bet $50 that I'd get cold feet and wouldn't go through with it. Dennis here bet 100 that you'd start crying the second I brought Brenda out. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the cruelty of his words sink in. And Perry bet a cool $200 that you'd still marry me anyway, no matter what I did. He said you were in too deep to back out now. He finally looked up from his phone, his eyes landing on me. He was still smiling, that bright, empty, terrible smile, waiting for me to be the good sport he and Keith had talked about. "So, Audrey? What do you say? Are you going to make Perry a rich man today?" The world went silent and sharp. I could see everything with a painful clarity. My mother's face, pale as a sheet, her hand over her mouth in horror. My father, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury, looking like he was about to physically leap over the pews and commit a felony. My best friend Lorraine was staring daggers at Mitchell, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. And I just looked at the man I was supposed to promise to love, honor, and cherish for the rest of my life. The man who had taken my love, my trust, my vulnerability, and my money, and had twisted it all into a cheap, cruel game for his own sick entertainment. And in that moment, all the pain, all the humiliation, all the buried resentment from years of his jokes burned away like fog in the sun. It was replaced by a cold, clear, and absolute certainty. The show was over. And it was my turn to deliver the grand finale. Something inside me, some reserve of strength I didn't even know I possessed, took over. The trembling in my hands stopped. The lump of grief in my throat dissolved. While Mitchell stood there, basking in the thick, awkward silence he had so masterfully created, waiting for my inevitable tears, I did the very last thing on earth he ever expected. I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a small, calm, chilling little curve of my lips. And it completely, instantly, wiped the smug look off his face. Confusion flickered in his eyes, followed by a flash of genuine fear. This wasn't in his script. This wasn't how the scene was supposed to play out. "Wow," I said, my voice shockingly steady and clear, carrying easily through the silent, cavernous barn. "Mitchell. This is truly something else. You've really outdone yourself this time." He thought I was playing along, trying to save face. I could see the wave of relief wash over him. "Right," he said, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "I knew you'd get it. It's just a bit of fun." "Oh, I get it," I said, my smile never wavering. "I get it completely." I turned to the horrified officiant, who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "Excuse me, sir," I said politely, as if I were asking for the salt at a dinner party. "The little table over there, the one where we're supposed to sign the marriage license, could I possibly borrow it for a moment? I need a flat surface." The poor man, just relieved to have a simple, direct instruction, nodded dumbly. Of course, my dear." I then turned my head and looked directly at my father in the front row. Our eyes met across the space. He knew. He had been waiting for my signal. Without a word, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out the slim black portfolio folder. He stood up, walked with quiet dignity up to the altar, and handed it to me. He leaned in and whispered, "I'm so proud of you," before giving my arm a firm, supportive squeeze and returning to his seat. I took the folder and walked calmly, deliberately, over to the small, white-draped table. The rustle of my wedding dress was the only sound in the entire barn. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I was running on pure adrenaline and 4 years of pent-up, righteous frustration. I placed the folder on the table and turned back to face the crowd, my witnesses. I made sure I had every single person's attention. Mitchell, Brenda, and the snickering groomsmen were just watching me, their expressions a comical mixture of confusion and growing unease. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice ringing with a newfound authority that surprised even me. "Before we continue with the festivities, I'd like to share a little document of my own with my dear fiancé." I opened the folder with a soft, deliberate motion. The heavy, cream-colored paper felt solid and real in my hands. This was it. The moment of truth. Mitchell was no longer smiling. He was staring at the folder in my hands as if it were a venomous snake. "Audrey," he said, his voice tight and low. "What the hell is that?" I held up the document so everyone could see the professional-looking cover page and the official, shiny gold seal Walter had so thoughtfully added. "This, Mitchell," I said, keeping my voice even and measured, almost conversational, "is just a little agreement I had my lawyer, Walter, draft up for me before the wedding. You know, just a precaution. A little insurance policy, in case you ever decided to pull a stunt, well, exactly like this one." A wave of murmurs rippled through the guests. I could see the satisfying sight of people pulling out their phones, no doubt hitting the record button. The color had completely drained from Mitchell's face. He looked gray. Brenda, sensing the tide was turning dramatically, took a subtle but definite step away from him. What the hell are you talking about?" he stammered, his bravado completely gone, replaced by a panicked squeak. "That's not real. You're bluffing." "Oh, but it feels real, doesn't it?" I said, letting a little bit of ice creep into my tone. I flipped through the pages theatrically, as if I were a seasoned attorney searching for a key piece of evidence. Here we are. Page 3, Section C. My favorite part. I cleared my throat and began to read aloud, my voice projecting with perfect clarity to every corner of the suddenly silent barn. "Should either party," I began, my eyes scanning the text but my focus entirely on Mitchell's horrified face, heretofore referred to as the betrothed, "engage in any act of willful and public humiliation directed at the other party prior to the official signing of the marriage license." I paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air. I looked directly at Mitchell, then at Brenda, then at the groomsmen. All joint financial obligations, including but not limited to any and all costs associated with the wedding ceremony, the reception, and the honeymoon, shall be rendered immediately null and void. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder, turning into audible gasps. Mitchell looked like he was going to be physically sick. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he calculated the cost of the venue, the caterer, the band, the flowers, the non-refundable honeymoon. "Wait," he croaked, his voice cracking. "What?" I wasn't finished. I held up a single, imperious hand for silence, and to my amazement, the crowd obeyed. "Oh, it gets better," I said, a genuine, triumphant smile finally touching my lips for the first time that day. "It also states, and I quote, the offending party, that would be you, dear, is required to offer a formal and public apology to the aggrieved party, that's me, in front of all present witnesses." I closed the folder with a soft, final, satisfying snap. I looked at him, at the man who had tried to make me the fool, the butt of the joke, and I saw nothing but a panicked, cornered little boy. "So," I said, my voice dangerously sweet. "The floor is yours, Mitchell. Apologize to me for humiliating me in front of our friends and family, and then we can start a conversation about how you're going to pay me back for the $100,000 I've spent on this little party of yours." The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and delicious. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He had been so sure of his power over me, so certain that I would just take it, that I would cry and then forgive him. He never, in a million years, imagined I would fight back. And he certainly never imagined that I would come so, thoroughly and completely prepared. Mitchell finally found his voice, though it was a weak, sputtering, pathetic version of his usual confident tone. "Audrey, this is insane. You're insane. It was a joke. It was just a stupid joke. You can't do this." I tilted my head, giving him the same condescending, pitying look he had given me so many times over the years when I'd told him he'd hurt my feelings. "Why would I be mad, Mitchell?" I asked, my voice dripping with false, saccharine innocence. "This is hilarious. It's all part of the fun, right? I'm just being a good sport." I let that sink in, watching the realization dawn on his face that I was using his own twisted logic against him. Then I delivered the punchline he never saw coming. "So, here's my joke," I said, my voice dropping, each word precise and sharp as a shard of glass. "I am canceling this entire wedding." His jaw dropped. "For real this time." His face was a comical mask of disbelief. You're kidding me. You wouldn't." "Oh, don't make that face," I said, waving a dismissive hand as if shooing away a fly. "You had your joke. You had your fun. Now it's my turn. The wedding is off. We're done." The barn erupted. It was a wave of sound, gasps, shocked whispers, and then, to my utter delight, a few scattered laughs. I looked over at my friend Lorraine in the front row. She was grinning from ear to ear, looking like she'd just won the lottery. I gave her a subtle nod, the one we'd practiced. She knew what to do. She pulled out her phone, and a second later, the powerful sound system in the barn, the one that was supposed to play our romantic first dance song, roared to life. But it wasn't our song. It was the unmistakable, defiant, and gloriously appropriate opening of Ray Charles's Hit the Road Jack. A wave of actual, genuine laughter swept through the guests. Some people were even clapping along to the beat. The groomsmen looked horrified, as if they were watching a car crash in slow motion. Brenda, the ex-girlfriend, was already trying to discreetly slink away, her red dress now looking cheap and ridiculous. Mitchell's face went from pale to a furious, blotchy red. "You can't do this to me," he shrieked, his voice cracking with pubescent rage. "I literally just did," I said calmly. I turned to my parents. "I think we're finished here." My mother was crying, but this time, as she told me later, they were tears of pride and relief. My father was already on his feet, telling the guests closest to them that the wedding was over but the open bar was not, and they should help themselves. Finally, I turned to Brenda, who was frozen halfway down the altar steps, caught in the spotlight of her own bad judgment. "And you," I said, my voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. "Congratulations. He's all yours now." That seemed to snap her out of it. She practically ran down the aisle and out the barn doors. Mitchell was left standing there all alone at the altar, his perfect joke having blown up in his face in the most public and spectacular way possible. "Audrey," he yelled, his voice desperate now. "You can't just leave me here like this." I turned back one last time at the top of the aisle. I looked at him, a pathetic figure surrounded by the ruins of the life he had so carelessly and arrogantly destroyed. "You love being the center of attention so much, Mitchell," I called out, my voice ringing with finality. "Well, congratulations. You finally got it." And with that, I turned my back on him, on the whole sorry mess, and walked out of my own wedding, head held high, leaving him to face the music alone. If you're still listening, if this story is resonating with you, please do me a small favor. Like this video and comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep sharing. So please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. Walking out of that barn was the single most liberating, terrifying, and triumphant moment of my entire life. The bright sunshine felt like a spotlight on my new beginning. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, my father on one side, Lorraine on the other, the gravel crunching under my heels. Behind me, I could faintly hear Mitchell still yelling my name, his voice a pathetic mix of anger and disbelief, all set to the soundtrack of Ray Charles telling him to get lost. The first thing we did was get to my car. As soon as I was inside, I reached up and ripped the veil from my hair, tossing it into the backseat like a piece of trash. It felt like shedding a skin. We drove in stunned silence for the first few minutes before Lorraine let out a small giggle. Then another. Soon, she was bursting with a real, deep, belly laugh. A moment later, my dad and I joined in. The three of us were howling with laughter, laughing so hard that tears were streaming down our faces. It was the hysterical, cleansing laughter that only comes after surviving a massive emotional explosion. My first stop was the fancy downtown hotel where Mitchell and I were supposed to spend our wedding night in the honeymoon suite. I walked into the gleaming marble lobby, still in my ridiculously expensive wedding dress, and marched right up to the front desk. The young woman there looked at me with wide, confused eyes. "I'd like to cancel the reservation for the honeymoon suite under the name Mitchell Thompson," I said, my voice perfectly calm. Then I booked a new, standard room for myself under my own name at a completely different hotel across town, one you would never think to look for me in. By the time I got to my new, anonymous room and shut the door behind me, the chaos had begun. My phone, which I had given to Lorraine for safekeeping, was having a complete meltdown. It was an endless, relentless stream of texts and missed calls from Mitchell. I turned off the ringer but couldn't resist looking. The progression of his texts over the next hour was a fascinating case study in narcissism. First came the utter confusion. "Audrey, where are you? Everyone is waiting." This isn't funny anymore. Come back and let's finish this. As if he genuinely expected me to come back and marry him after that. Then, when I didn't respond, came the rage. I can't believe you would humiliate me like this in front of my own family. You ruined our special day over a stupid joke. You're insane and you've embarrassed yourself. The complete and utter lack of self-awareness was staggering. Finally, when he realized I was truly gone and not coming back, came the threats, "You're going to regret this. I'll tell everyone you're the one who got cold feet and left me at the altar. I'll make you look like the villain in this story, I swear to God." But he didn't count on one thing: evidence. Before Lorraine left the venue, she'd had the brilliant foresight to get screenshots of the groomsmen's group chat from one of the other bridesmaids who had been shown it. The bets, the crude jokes about me crying, it was all there in black and white, a digital receipt for his cruelty. His attempt to rewrite history was doomed from the very start. In the quiet of my hotel room, I ordered a cheeseburger and fries from room service, peeled off the heavy wedding dress, and sat on the floor in my slip, feeling lighter than I had in years. In the age of social media, a story like this doesn't stay quiet for long. It turned out that at least a dozen guests, on both sides of the aisle, had recorded the entire debacle on their phones. Within 48 hours, clips of my wedding turned disaster, from Mitchell's smug announcement to my calm, cold takedown, were all over TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. The internet did what the internet does. Mitchell was swiftly and mercilessly dubbed the prankster groom. Memes were made using screenshots of his shocked face. My speech was transcribed and celebrated. He became a viral villain overnight. His desperate attempts to comment on some of the posts, insisting that it was just a joke and that I was a crazy ex, only fueled the digital fire. Thousands of comments tore him apart for his cruelty, his narcissism, and his breathtaking emotional abuse. The fallout in his personal life was just as swift and brutal. The story spread through our mutual friend group like wildfire. People who had been on the fence, who had awkwardly laughed at his past jokes, now saw them for what they were. They chose a side, and it wasn't his. His phone, he later complained to a mutual acquaintance, was a constant barrage of angry texts from people he thought were his friends, calling him out on his behavior. Even his own family was ashamed. His mother called my mother, sobbing, apologizing profusely for her son's actions. His father, a quiet, stoic man I had always respected, actually called me directly a few days later. "Audrey," he said, his voice heavy with regret and shame, "there are no words to say how sorry I am. I am so deeply ashamed of my son. We raised him better than that." Apparently, they had heard rumors he might pull some stunt at the wedding and had warned him against it. He hadn't listened. His groomsmen, the ones who had enabled and encouraged his worst impulses, quickly distanced themselves when they saw the public backlash. Keith even posted a vague, self-serving Instagram story about learning from your mistakes and the importance of respecting women, without ever actually apologizing or taking any real responsibility. Brenda, the ex-girlfriend in the red dress, told a mutual friend that Mitchell had sworn to her that I was in on the joke, that it was a big, elaborate prank we had planned together. When she realized he had used her as a prop in his twisted game and made her look like a fool, she blocked his number and wanted nothing more to do with him. The financial consequences hit him hard, too. He was absolutely furious when he discovered I had cancelled the non-refundable Bali honeymoon. He actually had the audacity to send me a long, rambling email demanding I pay him back for his share of the wedding costs, which was laughable considering his contribution was less than 10%. He threatened to get a lawyer and sue me for breach of contract. I had Walter send his lawyer a polite letter back, along with the screenshots of the group chat. We never heard from his lawyer again. The final nail in his coffin came about a month later. Someone, I still don't know who, sent the viral videos to his company's HR department. In the modern corporate world, that kind of public behavior is a liability. He was called into a meeting and fired for conduct unbecoming of the company's values. The man who wanted so desperately to be the star of a joke had finally become one himself. About a week after the non-wedding, there was a knock on my hotel room door. It was Mitchell. I'm still not sure how he found me, but I wasn't surprised he'd tried. He looked like a ghost. He hadn't shaved, his clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were red and puffy, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollowed-out look. Reality had finally, brutally, hit him. He tried to apologize. It was a rambling, incoherent mess of excuses. He said he never meant for it to go that far, that it was just a stupid idea that got out of control, that he just got carried away in the moment. I thought you'd laugh, he said, his voice cracking, tears welling up in his eyes. I always think you're going to laugh. I never, ever thought you would actually leave me. He told me he still loved me, that we could fix this, that he would go to therapy, that he would do anything. He pleaded for a second chance. And as I stood there in the doorway of my anonymous hotel room, looking at the man I had once planned to spend my life with, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. Just a profound, quiet emptiness where my love for him used to be. The well had run dry. For years of being chipped away, of being made to feel small and sensitive and humorless, had finally taken its toll. There was nothing left to save. I didn't say a word. I just went to my bag, took out a small envelope I had prepared, and handed it to him. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a mock-up of a wedding invitation I'd made on my laptop. The venue was the same barn. The date was that very day. The guest list read, "Everyone who witnessed your joke." And where the groom's name should have been, there was just a single, neatly typed sentence, "Now we're even." He looked up at me, his face pale and slack, speechless for the first time in his life. I gently closed the door in his face and slid the deadbolt into place. The months that followed were about rebuilding. I went to therapy, and it was the best decision I ever made. I talked to a professional to unpack why I had allowed myself to stay in a relationship that was so deeply disrespectful for so long, why I had constantly made excuses for his behavior. I learned to recognize red flags and, more importantly, to trust my own gut. I poured myself into my work and my friendships. I moved into a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a place that was all mine, filled with my things, painted in colors I chose. I even adopted another cat, a sleek, mischievous little black kitten I named Ziggy, to keep Bowie company. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was offered a fantastic new job in a different city. It was a major promotion, a huge step up in my career. It felt like the universe was rewarding me for finally choosing myself. And eventually, I started dating again. Cautiously at first. But this time, I knew what to look for, not just charm and a quick wit, but kindness, empathy, and genuine respect. The kind of man who lifts you up instead of cutting you down for a cheap laugh. And you know what? I found him. I never responded to any of Mitchell's further attempts to contact me. The last I heard, he was still struggling financially and was hopping between jobs. He wanted a joke, and his life became one. So that's my story. It's long, I know, but every detail felt important to share. Sometimes, the trash takes itself out. And sometimes, you have to be the one to summon the strength to drag it to the curb. Thank you so much for listening, for giving me your time. If you've been through anything like this, or if this story moved you in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. It's a powerful and healing thing to know that you're not alone. And if you haven't already, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories. Stay strong out there, and never, ever let anyone make you the punchline of their joke.